How's it going, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar. Welcome to Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. Today, it brings me great pleasure to get to talk to two of my favorite comic creators that, oh my gosh, I have been following their works probably longer than some of you all have been alive, so I don't know how that makes them feel, but we'll find out together. Mr. Ron Marz to my right-hand side. How are you, sir?
I am well, Omar. Thanks for having us, man.
Dude, it is my pleasure. And down there is Mr. Andy Lanning, all the way from across the pond.
Yes, that's right, Omar. Just outside of London, mate. So lovely to meet you and be on the show.
Oh man, it's my honor to have both of you here today. This is it's crazy because my childhood is full of both of your stories together, and then going into my adulthood and everything that I love about the stuff. Like, it's just nuts. From the cosmic stuff, because both of you did your own cosmic stuff. Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner over here, and then oh my gosh, Andy, Annihilation, Conquest, and War of Kings, and man. Yeah, you guys.
Can I just say as well? I grew up reading Ron's work as well. I'm
okay, you're a youngin. You're a youngin then.
It's pretty sassy for the one that doesn't have a hair on his head.
But I'm trying to think back of everything that the first time I remember reading both of your works. I think with Andy, I know it had to have been Death's Head 2. When Death's Head 2 was brought over to Marvel, it was the first time, like, I hadn't read the original Death's Head series. Marvel was, like, trying new things to bring over some UK books, and I just knew of Death's Head from Transformers. That was it. But I remember Death's Head being the first time seeing your name, and then you went over to Force Works, and oh my gosh. Yeah, from there, I've been...
Well, you got a good memory there, that's for sure, because, yeah, that's...
it's an okay memory. It's an okay memory. I think with Ron, I has to be Emerald Twilight. I mean, that sounds about right, because that was before your run on Thor, wasn't it?
It was kind of at the same time. It was
either one of those two.
I did Surfer and Thor kind of at the same time at Marvel, and then migrated over to DC for Green Lantern. So for a while, I was doing Surfer and Green Lantern at the same time, and had stepped away from Thor just because there wasn't enough room in my schedule, and also the editor and I couldn't come to any agreement on where the book was headed. So I finally said, look, if you don't know what you want and you're not sure that you want what I want, maybe we should just go our separate ways, and you can figure this out without me.
So you started out at Marvel and went to DC.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Same. Yeah, well, same, because obviously we had Marvel UK over our neck of the woods, so it was the natural progression.
Yeah, I mean, I got the call for Green Lantern because the DC editors were reading my Surfer stuff and apparently didn't find it loathsome, so they said, "Hey, do you want to do some stuff over here?"
That's cool. I mean, I was very...
play with these toys and in addition to those toys.
Well, mine was because I met Archie Goodwin at Marvel doing the Epic stuff, doing the Sleaze Brothers for Epic, which was a comic we created in Marvel UK that Archie took over and did as an Epic comic. And then when Archie went to DC, he reached out. I think it was Fate. The comic Fate, when they relaunched Dr. Fate.
Oh yeah, they made him cooler,
knife and stuff. Yeah, I did that.
They decided, man, we don't need that helmet. Let's get that crap out of here.
Let's make it 90s edgy. I remember that.
Yeah. 90s edgy with a big knife and lots of bandages. It was like
I remember that thing.
Bandages. But yeah, no, that was. Was that around the same sort of time though, Ron? Wouldn't it have been?
Yeah, I think probably like mid 90s is when I kind of migrated, maybe 94 for Green Lantern. And yeah, I think a lot of that Fate, Starman, all of those new books that came out of some of them came out of Zero Hour, but it was a time of throwing stuff at the wall to see what might stick.
But I think with Fate, actually, Omar, was the connection there was Tom Tenney, who drew Forceworks.
Forceworks, yeah.
He started designing Fate and started drawing it. I can't remember why now, but this is a common theme actually running through the career. He dropped out, and I recommended, because I was going to ink it, and I recommended Ant Williams, my good mate Ant, to draw it, and so he took over drawing it and started. I don't know how much book had been drawn, but he basically started from scratch on issue 1. And I think around that time it was a good time at DC, because we also did Resurrection Man. Dan and I launched Resurrection Man, it's a book I'm still very fond of to this day. That which Butch Geiss, again another common connection with me and Ron, which Butch drew, which was fantastic. But I never really knew Ron. I knew Ron's work, and like I say, we've got all of these connections that follow all the way through until Ron had gone to CrossGen, and we just started hanging out at San Diego. I think it was, Ron, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't remember this. Like most of my really good friends in this business, I don't really remember how we met. You just sort of end up kind of, like in the same spot at the same place, and you're like, oh, that.
Generally with one of these in his hand, which is why he can't remember how.
To go, well, that guy's not too much of an asshole. I guess I'll hang out with him.
Oh man, I love hearing that, because both of you were writing these stories that were very, it definitely left an impact on my life. Well, Emerald Twilight, of course, that's the one that brought a lot of people into Green Lantern and pissed off a lot of the older people that were reading Green Lantern. I can imagine what that was like for you coming in as the new writer, and they were like, hey, we want to get rid of Hal Jordan and make him bad. We got a new kid. People love new kids.
No, they didn't even have a new kid at the time.
Oh, really?
They were just, I mean, the offer was, hey, do you want to write Green Lantern? And I got that fairly late on a Thursday night. Actually, I had been in the office at Marvel. I had been in the office at Marvel talking to the Thor editor about what the hell we're going to do with my second year on the book, and not coming to conclusions. So I came back on the train back upstate, and I got a call from DC like after hours, and it was the aforementioned Archie Goodwin, Mike Carlin, Kevin Dooley, the Green Lantern editor, Denny O'Neil, and Paul. So when the Paul Levitz, when the publisher's on the line, either something really good's going to happen or something really bad's going to happen. So that's when they offered me Green Lantern. And then I said, oh, that's cool. I love that, I love the whole test pilot thing and the, Gil Kane costume on Hal. And they're like, oh, wait a minute. We're not done telling you what we want yet. So then the other shoe dropped, and it was, here's what we want to have happen to Hal. And then you're going to make up a new Green Lantern. So obviously I ended up taking the gig, although I had to think about it for a week or so. And, they really just let Daryl Banks and Daryl, who's obviously my artist on the book, at least initially, and then, Paul Pelletier, Jeff Johnson, and a number of other artists chipped in on the title. They just kind of let Daryl and I make up what we wanted. Kyle is who he is because they just kind of gave us enough rope and said, go make up something. And what we came back with is exactly what's in the book.
Now, Kyle was around for years as the Green Lantern. I mean, years, even after you left the book. And it's funny because, or at least pure coincidence, I'm sure, that Andy, you were working on Forceworks when they did The Crossing, right? Which is the storyline where they replaced Tony Stark with a teenage Tony Stark. But that didn't work out too well for them. And eventually that kind of got retconned. And I think Kurt Busiek did an amazing job of retconning that storyline. Even though I happen to actually like The Crossing. I know it's not a fan favorite, but I actually enjoyed a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing a Marvel retreat at that time where we were throwing ideas around for all of that stuff. And at the time, it made great sense. I just think probably, as with a lot of stuff in the 90s, the execution wasn't necessarily the best. You know, I mean, you can go back and look at a lot of that stuff, and you just go, ooh. But you know, the intent and the actual story angle around it all, because they, and again, it's like really dredging McGray matter here, but it was like they'd kind of backed themselves into a corner with Tony because they'd made him evil, and it, you know, which again was like, that makes sense, I guess. You know, you could take characters, you know, and do that again, like they did with Hal, you know, and it's like, but you've got to figure out how you get yourself out of that corner at some point, I guess, and this was a lot of, you know, a lot of weaving of various timelines and bits and bobs like that to try and make it, you know, make sense. And, you know, it ultimately fell very flat indeed. But it's yeah, I like you. There's a core of a good story there, just not necessarily played out as well as it could have done, I guess.
Yeah, and I think by that time they had already kind of made some kind of deal behind the scenes with the Image folks about sending those characters over for about a year. You know, so I and like a lot of people my age also stopped reading comics in the late 90s, like right after the late 90s. But one of my favorite things is coming back to comics like around 2002 was seeing some familiar names working on books. Like, and I love that about it. Like I remember finding, it was a trade paperback of Andy, your run on Legion of Superheroes, which I had never read.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ron, you were at this new cool kid club, man. You were at CrossGen, and I fell in love with Scion. Like Scion was my jam. With Jimmy Chung at the time and Jim Chung now. But oh my gosh, that stuff that they were doing over there. And then I found Mystic. I found what was the other one you had? Sojourn. You had no. What was that it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wrote Sojourn and I wrote The Path.
Yeah.
And had a good time doing most all of it. You know, it was a brief shining star that, you know, shone pretty briefly. But while we were there, I think we made some good comics.
And again, and another touch point between us, because Jimmy at the time had come up through Marvel UK and worked with us on Force Works. I'd put him forward as an artist on Force Works, and I remember writing a letter of recommendation for him when he was going over to work at CrossGen as well.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that all this is connected. Now, kind of little bit of a thing, but we are getting our very first CrossGen omnibus from Marvel Comics.
Ooh.
Just saying. Maybe
they're doing a sigil omnibus later this year, which strikes me as a bit of an odd choice to be the first omnibus. But
well, you know, me, I would have gone with Scion, but that's because I have a personal love for that. That stuff was just my.
That's weird because I would have gone with Scion too. But
would you have gone for Scion?
I'm not an unbiased source of information.
I would have gone with Ruse myself, but you know,
very interesting.
Ruse is pretty damn good. Ruse is actually my favorite book that we published, but I'm not sure there were enough Ruse issues to fill out an omnibus.
No,
but there are certainly enough issues of Scion, because I think there were 39, right?
There's probably 42 or 43 because I left the book with 39 due to some backroom machinations, and Ian Edgerton came in and took over for a handful of issues, I think. And that Luke Ross was drawing, and unfortunately, I believe Luke Ross got boned out of his payments for those issues because the ship was going down.
I remember when that was happening.
So I left staff and went back to DC and Dark Horse, and then Luke Ross called me saying that he hadn't been paid for, you know, like 3 issues or something like that, and was owed a substantial amount of money. And I was like, oh my God, stop drawing. Don't draw any more pages, because, you know, because they're not going to pay you. You know, it's just not going to happen. So when DC offered me the opportunity to come back and do the last 6 issues of Kyle's Green Lantern volume, I knew that Luke needed the work, so I pitched Luke Ross to them to take the book on, and that's how he ended up drawing the last 6 issues.
That's awesome, man. I love it. I love that you guys are so connected, and that guy's blown up, Luke Ross. I mean, seriously, like
I inked Luke on an X-Men issue, if I remember rightly, which I've kept a page of because it was one of the poker group, so it had Wolverine, the Thing, the Beast, you know, Gambit, Rogue. They were all playing poker in it, and it's like I love that secret poker game that's run as a thread through those comics. Yeah,
that's a cool one. Was that in the day that like Wolverine and Ben Grimm could be smoking cigars, or wow, you know, it was a while ago then, because there was, you know,
they had real fatties. So
smoking going on in the
lots of smoking going on. Yeah,
it's been a while. It's been, oh my goodness, I think almost, has it been 2 decades?
Something like that, because I know that I can't, you know, I'm doing a Warlock series for Marvel right now, and I cannot have Pip Patrol smoking a cigar.
Has he got a vape? Can he vape?
I don't know. I should like toss that in there, and you know,
I think not smoking,
drag on a vape and then toss it away, because you know he knows you look stupid doing that.
I think not smoking is better off than vaping. That's just my 2 cents. Don't know how anybody else feels about that.
Like, you can imagine him like taping 10 of them together just to make it the right size.
So yeah, coming back to comics, it was great to see both of your names, and then I can't stress the fact that you also co-created one of my favorite characters, Ron. Not just Kyle, but at Marvel it was Genis-Vell.
Oh,
I love that character, man, and I'm glad he's getting his own omnibus, and he's got I think he had another series just recently.
I know they brought Peter David back to write another mini. I was sort of annoyed at that whole situation, because like I created the character and I never got a chance to write him again. Like anytime he had a solo series, I didn't get a sniff, because there had been such an editorial turnover in Marvel. I don't think anybody remembered that Ron Lim and I created him. So, you know, all of a sudden there was, you know, this book was announced with, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I wonder, oh, wait a minute. That's a guy I created and never got a chance to write him again. But I'm getting a chance to do that now, because he's in the Warlock series that
awesome.
That I'm done writing.
And Andy, come on, Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh my gosh, man! Like, how can I not bring?
Did you have something to do with that, Andy?
Was that another Andy Lanning?
He's like, this is my Guardian shelf here.
Oh my gosh! Okay, when I was reading those titles, Annihilation and Conquest, I thought during Annihilation, Nova got a launch. Like they greenlit Nova, and I was like, man, I hope other people are reading this, because I don't want this to get canceled. I really like this book. And then we got note that we were going to get another crossover, Annihilation Conquest. And I was like, oh my gosh, Star-Lord, he's playing a bigger part of this. He's getting his own team. That was I think it was Keith Giffen that wrote that one. And then they announced a new Guardians of the Galaxy ongoing series with the team that, you know, was, I guess, curated by Giffen and the editorial team. I don't know. Did you guys have anything to do with picking and choosing characters for the ongoing series?
Yeah. No. I mean, it's so going back to the Nova one, this is all the machinations of Andy Schmidt, who off the back of Dan and I writing the Legion series, he was a big fan of that, and he's always been a massive champion of the cosmic stuff at Marvel, and we put together a Nova pitch which Chris Batista designed all the characters for.
Okay.
And it didn't get approved, so we carried on with the Legion stuff, and then I think it was about a year or so later, Andy got back in touch to say, look, I've had a mini series approved that Keith's writing called Annihilation, and I want to do a Nova mini series that spins out of that. Chris is unavailable, but do you guys want to write that? You know, and I believe we suggested Kev Walker for the art on that one, because we've been working. I think Dan worked with him on 2000 AD, but anyway, I've known Kev for a while. So and like you say, that then got out of Annihilation, the Nova book carried on. Keith and Andy were the architects of Annihilation. Keith kind of basically said to us, "This is where Nova and the Nova Corps are at the beginning of the story. This is where I need them to be at the end of the story. Can you do whatever the hell you want in between?" Which was brilliant, and so we did. And along the way, kept doing gut checks with Keith. I remember just having rambling conversations with Keith. And if you ever spoken to Keith, it's like, you throw one idea at him and he knocks 100 back at you that you're just like,
that guy is a comics legend.
He's amazing. And so we kept, we kept finessing that story along the way, and then Nova book got approved and we carried on doing that. And so then when Andy said, "I'm going to do another Annihilation event, do you want to write that one?" So Dan and I came up with Conquest, and we then said to Keith, who I think was doing stuff at DC but had enough time to do a miniseries, "Keith, this is where we want Star-Lord at the beginning of the book. This is where we want Star-Lord at the end of the book." and in that series, Keith put together Groot and Rocket, Mantis, I think it was Captain Universe, and Star-Lord. And we'd basically just followed the themes that he had set. He'd made Star-Lord a lot more of a military character, and a bit more grizzled and sardonic, and created that relationship between Rocket and Groot in the book. And it was kind of like we just said they're like a dirty dozen.
Yes.
And it shows how good my math is because there's 5 of them.
The idea, right?
It's like the theme, if not the numbers, if not numerically, thematically, and so basically at the end of Conquest, when we got back and we had Groot sacrifice himself and all that sort of business, we ended up with, the beginnings of a team, and by that time, Andy Smith had moved on and Bill Roseman had taken up editorial duties, and he said, "Let's do another ongoing book to come out of the series like we've done." And he goes, and he said, "Well, let's do, how do you feel about doing a Guardians of the Galaxy book?" And I love Guardians of the Galaxy. I've got, the original issues here with the Gene Colan ones.
Oh, nice, yeah.
And then just loved all of the Valentino stuff as well. The things with the Stark and all that stuff. And we're like, "Oh, great," and he said, "Yeah, but let's do it with our characters." And they just take the name, the Guardians of the Galaxy. And we were like, yeah, because who's to say that in that future, these guys weren't inspired by the deeds of these Guardians of the Galaxy? So
way to bring it back around. Yeah,
exactly. Like loop it all together. So so that's how that got pulled together. And then just playing with those characters. I think Ron will appreciate this, given that when you get to play with the toys, that's pretty much what you do. And then at some point you got to hand them back. No one was doing cosmic stuff, so we just kept saying, "Can we use Warlock?" And it was like, yeah, and then we were like, so in Annihilation it was like, "And can the villain be Ultron?" Because it's like,
wait, not only did you get Warlock, Adam Warlock, but you also got Warlock from the New Mutants Warlock.
We got all of them. I mean, we everything we asked for, basically they just went, "Yeah, why not?" Because and I think, I don't know, like talking, telling tales out of school, but Joe Quesada has gone on record as saying he's not a fan of comic books. And so there was no massive editorial desire to do the cosmic books apart from Andy Smith at the time, and then Bill. Those guys became the champions of it, to the point that we took the character of American Flag. Is it Flag? I can't remember what his name is now. But
Jack Flag.
Jack Flag. Sorry, well done, Jack Flag. We had him in there saying stuff like, he actually says in it, "I don't get the cosmic stuff," which is a verbatim quote of Joe Quesada, which we put in the book. Because it was like,
and unless I'm mistaken, your artist on Guardians the lovely and talented Paul Pelletier.
Exactly. Yeah.
Who
Again,
worked with me on Green Lantern and is in the Resolution book. So
see how this stuff, yeah.
So really what it is like Paul is the center of the universe and we all just orbit around.
We orbit him.
Yeah. I love his artwork. I've been a huge fan.
He's fantastic. He reminded me, actually, I inked Paul on one of the Tangent books. Did you write a Tangent book, Ron?
I did. I wrote Metal Men and Power Girl, neither of which you worked on.
No, ours was the Flash, I think.
You did the Flash, which I think Todd DeZago wrote that.
Okay.
I did Metal Men with Mike McCone and Power Girl with Dusty Abel.
Okay. Because I inked Paul on the on the Flash, and he brought that up the other day because I inked him on the 6-page story that we've done for Resolution. I'm not on that one, sorry, on the spread for Resolution. And he's like, oh yeah. He goes, great to work with you again because we worked together on the Flash. And I was like, oh my god, I'd completely forgotten that, absolutely blanked that from my memory. But Paul's sensational artist. He's absolutely.
Don't sell yourself short, guys. You guys are amazing storytellers, and that is part of.
But frankly, we're as good as the artists we work with. That's the deep dark secret that most comic writers won't tell you is that, if we came up with a brilliant story, but the art looks like hell, it doesn't matter. It's useless. So we've been fortunate to work with a bunch of really good artists, and we just ride their coattails. We take credit for it too, but we ride their coattails.
So is that how all this came about then? I'm serious. Like I chose the perfect background with the stars because it seems like all this was written in the stars. You guys worked together. You guys had worked together before Resolution, right?
Yeah.
And what made you decide to work on this book and then have all these different artists working or involved?
Well, I mean, so writing wise, Ron and I worked on a project when I was working at a company called Magic Leap, which was a tech startup doing augmented reality glasses, which was pretty wacky. And I roped Ron in onto that, and we wrote a comic book that was basically never going to see the light of day, which is a great shame because it's wonderful. Based on a thing our friend Greg Broadmoor created called Dr. Groardborts, which is a steampunk sort of like British colonial satire, which is wonderful. And then we also worked together on this Twilight Imperium graphic novel and a thing for DC called Endless Winter.
That's right. There was a mini-series event, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. And the thing is a lot of that stuff came out of the fact that I'd worked at the Magic Leap. I was like their creative director at Magic Leap, but the company downsized because of COVID. So I found myself a gainfully unemployed comic book writer again. Was looking to do some stuff, and weirdly enough, Alex from DC, our editor, reached out just to say, "Oh, we're doing an event book this winter. Do you want to write it?" And I was like, "Oh, did you hear that I was back on the?" And he goes, "No, I just liked your stuff from Annihilation." It was that coincidental. So I pinged Ron and said, "Do you want to chip in on that?" And so we started pitching other bits and bobs, didn't we, Ron, at the time? And then we started talking to the guys from Zoop. Who were setting up their new platform for sort of like comic book distribution, crowdfunding platform. So that's when we were like, okay, and I think we were like the second or third campaign that they launched, and it was like, okay, what do we want to do? And it's like it's got to be somewhat commercially viable. It can't just be a vanity project. It's like suddenly Ron and I do the book you always wanted to see. It's an Arga saga set in the 1800s. It's a romance comic. It's like it's what we really want to write.
It's a romance comic with people sitting around and talking for 80 pages. We didn't. we didn't think that would fly. So
Okay, so I have to ask then, what is Resolution about? Who's got the pitch? And how much when you're working with two writers, right? Like how much is done? Like you just feed off each other? Because I know, well, I mean, Andy, you've worked like that before, but Ron, have you?
Yeah, I don't solo write,
Okay.
because I really enjoy the collaborative process, because having everything I've done like that came as a sort of side product of, it was either drawing it, which I started off as, drawing stuff and then writing it based on what I'd drawn, and backing into things, and like inking. I fell into inking because a comic was running late and they needed someone to do it, so I did it. And
okay.
And then just like writing stuff with Dan back in the day at Marvel UK, it really was like quite literally sitting in a room, bullshitting ideas around, so I love working like that, and Ron, have you written with anybody else?
I've written with a few people, but I've written with my buddy Dave Rodriguez. We did the Skylanders books together and a few others. But generally not much. I think it's and I've written with Starlin, of course.
Yeah.
So generally I was a solo act, but I think it helps when you're working with somebody who's a good friend and also kind of shares the same storytelling sensibility. We're not butting heads on stuff at all. We generally think of story in the same way. Like when I did Marvel versus DC and I was co-writing with Peter David, Peter David and I have wildly different storytelling sensibilities. Peter's there to set up the jokes, and he's sort of very tongue in cheek, and that's just not what my stuff is like. So we were pulling in opposite directions on a lot of that, and had to figure out how we were going to integrate all of that. When Andy and I write together, there's really none of that. We're sort of immediate. We're both pulling on the oars in the same direction from day one.
So, who approached who then? Here, I know you guys were talking together. Then who said, "Hey"?
I think Jordan from Zoop approached me initially and said, "Hey, we're starting this thing, and I've wanted to work with you for a while. And what do you think?" And I said, "Well, that sounds kind of cool. It's a nice opportunity when somebody comes and says, 'What is the thing you would like to do?' Because we'll do that." And so immediately after, I pinged Andy and said, "Hey, these guys want to do whatever we want to do. What do you think?" So this is the idea that came from it. And it's essentially Unforgiven meets the Green Lantern Corps. The
Nova Corps.
Or the Nova Corps.
Nice.
You just said that because you have the Nova helmet on your shelf. If you really love Nova, you'd be wearing it for this interview.
I'm never going to get it off again. I've tried that before.
I mean that's really the shorthand of it. This is Unforgiven meets Green Lantern or Nova Corps.
You had me at Unforgiven. Like that's all you needed to say.
But it was like I said, we were like, okay, yeah, we could go and do a sword and sorcery tale, whatever. But it was like, no, let's double down on what we know and what we do best. And it was that idea of, okay, so what can you do with the central conceit, which is an old idea done time and time again of the cosmic space police. It's like and obviously one which we both got rich history with. And it's like, okay, so what's an interesting angle to come at that from? And the Unforgiven, when you staple, if you do look, or the other thing is refract it through that lens. It's like, okay, so what if you're at the end of a superhero's career? In fact, you're beyond the end of it. You've gone into their retirement, into their twilight years. And then it's like, okay, now we've got to build a credible universe for that interesting idea to play out in, and that's when it gets really interesting.
Yeah, essentially most superhero stories are the origin and then the middle, because they don't ever end. There's no end to most superhero stories, at least Marvel and DC stories, which are about, sort of propagating the IP and, putting a monthly product out there. There's no last Green Lantern story, because there's going to be another one next month. So for us in this situation, we could tell that last story. We could skip to the end of a hero's career and see what comes of it. See what happens when they're dragged back into service, so to speak. And I really, it really fell together pretty easily. I mean, Andy came up with the basic bones of it, and we both kicked in ideas, and I think it fell into place really easily. In fact, this morning I went over the last of the lettering. We had a couple of lettering corrections that I wanted to make, so I had to read the whole thing again. And honestly, I sat there and went, "Man, this thing's really good. Like, this doesn't suck. I'd pay money for this."
Okay, so then, really quick, tell me about the different tiers, because it looks like there's different tiers for Zoop. There is the digital copy, but this is the home of collected editions. I mean, who wants that, right? I mean, if you're gonna go collected editions, you gotta go with the next one up, which is the oversized hardcover graphic novel. And that's a hardcover. It's a 9x12, right? That's what you get. You also get the digital copy. That I know I'm going to be asked. So, is it all in one? Is this done? This is it. This is the whole story.
That would be a lie. No, this is. We would very much like to come back and do another one.
Oh, okay.
This is. I don't want to say the first chapter, because I think there's a little bit more of a sense of closure than that to it. But there's definitely more story to tell, and we would like to tell that story. But sort of first things first. We finally got this done. We'll get it into the hands of the backers, and then we'll sort of take a deep breath and worry about getting the next bit of story out there as we can.
I think it was like, when we started, it was like, let's write a done in one story, but it grew because of the world building that we did.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. You know what I mean? It's one of those ones where it's like, now you could, to a certain extent, and it's like we wanted to explore also the initial idea, and I don't want to give away too much, but the idea of how do you do a post-credit sequence in a comic book sort of thing? It's like, because that and it was like that expanded the story beyond where we were going to leave it. And we also, just you want to end on a little bit more, but you also want to end on a big beat that's hopefully a bit of a hurrah moment sort of thing as well. So it was getting unrelentingly bleak otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, plus I think the more we got into it, the more we were like, man, this is pretty cool. This I was going to say this world we created, but really it's more than that. It's the universe we created. Has a bunch of stuff in it that we can really use as a playground. So I would love to return to this, and I think hopefully we will. Mm-hmm. But again, first things first, let's get this one in everybody's hands, and make sure everybody doesn't hate it, and we'll go from there.
So you two being the writers, who did you guys get to play with? Who are the artists on this particular story?
Well, initially, Rick Leonardi was going to do the whole thing for us, but he had to bow out. So we've got cover by Rick, character designs by Rick. An artist named Neto Diaz took over the interiors for us. Neto is doing a bunch of stuff at Marvel. He was on he was in the X-Men family for a while. He just launched the new Predator series that Marvel is doing. So he is just a terrific Brazilian artist. So he's cresting his wave, so to speak. And we had worked with Neto on a Twilight Imperium hardcover graphic novel based on the board game, which is a big cosmic spaceships, alien worlds, alien races, all of that stuff. Like that's what that graphic novel is. So we knew that, oh, well, he can do, that's his thing. He can do that. He can frankly draw anything, but we were really confident in his ability to come in and pick up a world that he didn't necessarily design, but to put his stamp on it. So Neto is the artist on the majority of the material, but we have flashback sequences drawn by Rick Leonardi, Tom Ranney, Bart Sears, and Paul Pelletier. And Paul Pelletier also did a 6-page backup story, a bonus story for the book.
And then we've also got the and you'll get to this with the other tiers, a portfolio where we cajoled, bribed, and begged some friends to do us some pin-ups. So you're going to get like a collection of same sized prints by people like Liam Sharp, Trev Hairsign, Phil Jimenez, Ron Lim, Bart Sears, Wes Craig. I'm missing people.
Paul Pelletier, Ant Williams, Jeff Johnson, Greg Broadmoor. I feel like we forgot somebody.
It's like 12 people, isn't there?
Luke Ross. Yeah.
That's good. I'm glad. So I was looking at the different tiers, and I was like, who is the lucky bastard that got the original cover art signed by Rick Leonardi? Because that's awesome. So a lot of the sketches are gone. What it looks like, it's mainly the book that's left and a few. Well, there's a few other slots that are open too, but
I think they're going to they're going to open it up again, or unless they've already done that. But yeah, they open it up again. And I've said for what it's worth, I'll scribble more inane drawings for people. I'm quite happy to do that.
Oh no, this looks great, guys. This looks great. You got 12 days, right? 12 days till it's up.
Yeah, we opened the campaign up again for a couple of weeks so that now that the book is done, we can we can get it in people's hands if they missed out on the first time, get it in retailers' hands if they are so inclined to I think there's a retailer pack of like 5 hardcovers. And this is sort of the deluxe edition of this story. We wanted to do it oversized just because we just think oversized books are cool. That's really what it came down to. Is we can kind of call our shot on this stuff. So we let's go a little bigger. It's almost sort of European album size. The art look that much better at that size.
I'm glad you guys did. I mean, obviously, I love all kinds of collected editions, but my favorite ones are always the bigger artwork, big omnis, the big deluxe editions. And I'm glad that you guys decided to go that route, to go the hardcover route immediately. I think it's great.
It's an odd thing in comics that we sort of wait till the end of the process to put out the big, deluxe hardcover edition, which is the mirror opposite of how the rest of the publishing world works. Like, Stephen King does a new book.
Yeah,
it comes out as a $35 hardcover, and then a trade, then a slightly smaller trade edition, and then finally the smallest trade paper, mass market paperback edition. So comics starts with the cheapest product first, and then works its way up to the more expensive one, whereas every other form of publishing starts with the most expensive form and works down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've noticed that too. I think Dark Horse actually does it that way. They do well. For some titles, right? Like for some titles, they go ahead and do a hardcover, and then they do a softcover edition.
Right. Well, I mean, we're certainly in an era where where original graphic novels are not as few and far between as they used to be, which I think is great.
I completely agree.
Package. Like the Twilight Imperium graphic novel that Andy and I did with Neto. It's like 120 pages. 120 page hardcover right out of the gate. There's no singles, no smaller packages, which was great. I mean, it was lovely to be able to sit down and write the whole thing.
And I think the other thing again with this is, like Ron said, this is almost like a special collector's edition piece. It's like there's a like those book clubs like the Folio Society who do their version of something and they put it out there and it's really nice. It normally comes in a slipcase and this sort of shit, and it's like, so if you're going to put something out there that is a limited edition, then our thought was then make it really nice. It's like, and we thought this was a decent package. And again we'll get into this again. The companion piece will give you all of the gubbins that went into the stew, basically. Which we thought again was those. It's like the DVD extras. Those are the things that I love myself. You can see the Joker Absolute Edition here, which has just got a whole section. It's got the whole script in it and drawings and everything.
I was keeping an eye on your shelf, and somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, why do you have your books like that? And I'm curious too. Why are they laying like? Okay, your absolutes.
So that one's like that because there's no room for it to go in there. So it's like,
and he's got like that because he's a slob.
No, I meant the books on your left. Like you got Wonder Woman by Phil Jimenez, and then you've got
what these?
Yes, I guess it would be your right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So there really isn't much of a rhyme or reason to it. I mean, a lot of the stuff here is stuff I've done, and that's what I've done. Then you get to a certain point, it's just, Ron and I've been very lucky over our time, particularly with DCs. You get a box of all of the goodies used to come through, including all the hardcover collections, and so a lot of those I would keep for myself because they're too good to not keep.
I used to get 2 boxes every month because I was on the list twice, and so I would get like the whole big box of all the hardcovers. And I called this guy. This is years ago, but I called DC and I'm like, look, man, you're sending me 2 boxes of everything, including all of the the hardcovers, the archive editions, all of that stuff. And I'm like, you should, I mean, it's great, but I'm not deserving of this stuff. Like, just give me one.
So humble.
And they were like, if we take your name off the list for one of those boxes, it's probably going to leave for both of those boxes, and then you get nothing. So just keep taking them. So, as they said, eventually one of those will fall off the list and it'll be, you'll be back to where you should be. But for about a year, I got 2 boxes of all the hardcovers and just gave them to all my friends at the weekly volleyball match.
That's awesome.
Who are all other comics guys. So
you also have some stuff behind you there, Ron. I see a lot of are those statues at the very top? See Hellboy.
Yeah, those are all statues by a friend of mine named Ruben Procopio, who was a sculptor, artist, sculptor, worked for Disney for years. Doing sculpting and animation for them, and those are all by him, including the sculpture the statue that came from my Samurai Heaven and Earth series that I did for Dark Horse. Which is next to the Kato and Green Hornet statue up there.
Oh, I couldn't guess that one.
So yeah, that's the Samurai Shiro from my Samurai Heaven and Earth book at Dark Horse, which Luke Ross drew. So it's, again, it's all people know all people in this business.
And that's great. That's why you don't burn bridges, or you shouldn't.
Maybe. Well, look, it's a small business. If you're going to act like a jerk, people find out about it pretty quickly. Yeah,
yeah. I'm not gonna say anything else. You guys were talking about hardcovers, so I have to. Andy, your work at Marvel, the entire Cosmic Saga has been collected into 5 big omnis, and that's beautiful to look at. Now, we've got the Crossing in omnibus format. ForceWorks had a big trade paperback. My question is, Ron, when are we going to get some Kyle Rayner love, buddy? Dude, they canceled volume 3 of the trade paperback. Come on.
I don't know. It's an odd thing because I now look, they don't ultimately tell us kind of what's going on or how this why these decisions are made. So I don't know why volume 3 was canceled I do know that, at least according to my royalty statements, volumes 1 and 2 sold pretty well.
Right.
So I really don't know. I would love for them to do a, Kyle omnibus, or two of them if you wanted to, if the idea was to put together, my run and Judd's run in 2 different volumes, because that would probably be 150 issues or something like that.
Yeah, we're looking at 4 different omnis. I've mapped it out already. I got you, Ron. I've already this is what I do. This is what I do, Ron. I've mapped it out for you. And I was so I actually talked to Peter Tomasi about this. I interviewed him about the Green Lantern Corps omnibus, which I'm very happy for, right? But the way that DC did it was Peter Tomasi's Green Lantern Corps. And I was like, what's really missing from this is that Ion Maxi series that kind of leads into the Sinestro Corps, and it would have benefited from adding it and properly mapping it in there. But in the end, I don't know. They may change their minds. The DC just may have changed their minds. But yes, that we definitely need that stuff. I'd love to see some Silver Surfer too. Some Silver Surfer Ron Marz omnis collected. That would be nice.
There's a fair amount of my Surfer stuff collected in
it's an Epic
omnis. And both the Epic Edition trade paperbacks and the various and sundry Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, like Infinity Crusade, like all of that stuff has a fair number of my Surfer issues peppered through it. The one that seems odd to me is that there's no collected edition of the Herald Ordeal, which was my 6-issue story from 70 to 75. That was, seemed to be like one of the central points of my run on the book. And the one that I'm constantly getting people, people will bring that set to be signed at shows. So maybe at some point we can get one of those, but I assume a lot of that stuff depends on, when Silver Surfer shows up in a movie.
Well, I was trying to think of when it will show up in Epic format, because I'm sure it'll show up in Epic format sometime first.
Well, when you figure it out, you let me know. You're paying a lot closer attention to this stuff than I am, because sometimes like I don't realize they've reprinted something until like the royalty statement shows up in my email, and I go, oh, okay, I did that.
Nice. Yeah, I get to break the news of omnis and epics for Marvel Comics, so I was trying to sit here and think, how close are we? Because they just did the Resurrection. And that is 76 through 85 of Silver Surfer.
Okay. And that's with that's with Resurrection that Starlin wrote and drew.
Yeah, that's also collected in there. But I'm sorry, that's what the Epic is called. It's Silver Surfer Epic Collection Resurrection. And it's got your 76 through 85 in there, and the annual number 6 and the Resurrection, and then the Secret Defenders in there.
Secret Defenders. There's a blast from the past.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun.
I'll take your word for it.
It was a lot of fun. I was reading it, man. I loved it.
That's not a series that I ever intended to write or knew I was writing.
Oh yeah?
What, even while you were writing it?
Briefly, I went to lunch with the Thor editor, who was also happened to be the Secret Defenders editor. When we were trying to figure out what was going to happen with Thor, because I was not happy with the artist situation on Thor, and I had directions that I wanted to take the book. So I went into the office and thought we were going out to discuss what was going to happen with the next year of Thor, and Tom Grinberg was going to be the artist. He was there for lunch as well, and we end up going to lunch with my editor, Mike Rockwitz, his assistant Joe Andriani, and Ralph Macchio, who was my editor's editor, was my editor's boss. And we get to lunch, and we go to Ralph's favorite Italian place, which was this really nice Italian place a few blocks over. And Ralph turns to me and says, "I'm so glad you've agreed to take on Secret Defenders. What do you have planned?"
That's how you.
And this is the first time the word Secret Defenders had ever been spoken in my presence. So I looked at the editor, and his eyes were like golf balls, and I realized that that the editor had been assigned to find a new team for Secret Defenders, hadn't bothered to do so. So when I walked into the office that morning, he must have gone to Ralph and said, Ron and Tom are going to do it. They're our guys. So I figured that I could either throw my editor under the bus and tell Ralph, I have no idea what you're talking about. Or I could just roll with it and save my editor's neck, which is what I did. So I just made up a year's worth of stories on the spot for what we were going to do with Secret Defenders, which was, the default answer was, well, we'll have Thanos run the Secret Defenders, and we'll do some villains, and we'll do the opposite of what the Secret Defenders have been so far. So Ralph said, "Oh, that sounds great. I'm so excited to read it. I'm sure you and Tom will do really well." And of course, Tom, who thinks he's going to go draw Thor, is slack-jawed because he has no idea what's going on.
Oh, man.
So on the walk back to the office, Tom pulls me aside and says, "What the fuck is going on?" And I said, "I don't know. I have no idea. Like, this is the first time I've ever heard Secret Defenders, but apparently you're drawing it." and then I grabbed the editor and pulled him away from Ralph and said, "Is there something you want to tell me?" He said, "Oh, yeah, you and Tom are gonna take over Secret Defenders. Is that okay?" And I'm like, "Well, apparently it is. Apparently that's what's going to happen." So he was apologetic, and I ended up, I don't know, I don't think I stayed on the book for like a year because I really had no interest in writing it, but I was in deep at that point. I couldn't just walk away. So, yeah, I stayed on the book for another, 8-10 issues or something like that. And the postscript to the story is that part of my run was this big storyline with Thanos in it.
Yeah. And
years later, they ended up putting it in a Thanos trade paperback when, when the first movie, it was my cosmic power stuff plus all the Secret Defender stuff for this big, thick, like $35 trade.
Yep.
That had Thanos on the cover. So it sold really well. So
people didn't know they were getting Secret Defenders.
So the kicker is, I ended up writing Secret Defenders that I didn't want to do, and it gets stuck in this Thanos paperback, and I got a royalty check for $9,000, like out of nowhere.
That's a win-win, Ron.
I didn't even know they were reprinting it, and this was a few years ago when Marvel was still sending actual checks out with Spider-Man on them. And I go to the mailbox, and there's this check for $9,000. I'm like, what the hell is this for? This got to be some mistake. So I had to call down the office and say, why did you send me this money? They're like, oh yeah, the Thanos thing sold really well.
It's so I mentioned getting to announce like omnis and stuff for Marvel Comics. Like I just I did the overview of the War of Kings, the new printing of it. And how many of the creators like are on our social media like, oh, that's cool, I just found out about this. And it's always interesting to me like how almost not disconnected because they're reprinting stories from long ago or not so long ago. And it's like a different entity, like they're doing their own thing, and then creators get to find out, like you did, which I guess is a really good way of finding out when you get a check that you had no idea what it was for.
Yeah, it's we are. It sounds like a cliche, but we are often the last ones to know. Sometimes I don't even know until the books, until like a couple of comp copies show up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. That's true.
I'm going to take a couple of questions here from the chat. They've been really patient. So thank you all for joining us, and hit that like button. And yes, if you haven't checked out either of these gentlemen's work, it's time you find out. Although I'm pretty sure most of you have. Somebody was just, my buddy Aussie Bo was talking about how the Secret Defenders was one of the first comics he ever read. Stories that you just shared behind the scenes.
And yet he's still stuck with comics.
And yes, Arthur, there is a gap in the Silver Surfer Epic collections, which should cover the Herald ordeal Ron mentioned. Thank you, brother, for checking on that. Big fan of Silver Surfer's run and Andy's Thanos imperative. Oh my gosh. Wait, Andy, how do you say the Mad Titan's name?
Thanos.
And what about you, Ron?
Sir.
I asked Jim Starlin this question because I get that all the time.
Well, do you get Thanos? A lot of Thanos? Is it
Thanos? Yeah? Like the movie really
Thanos. I mean, so just a little tidbit on this one was I said we kept asking for things and no one said no to us, so we were just getting
my gosh.
It got good to us in the end because we I think it was in the second, maybe the third episode of the Guardians of the Galaxy ongoing comic. We introduced the fact that the Church of the Sacred Ding Dongs, whatever they're called, had a cocoon, and Adam was already in the world. So right. and we just introduced that because it was like, why not? You got these things. It's like we didn't have a clue what was in it. It was like, we'll deal with that when we got to deal with it. And I can't even remember what issue it is where that opens and that, because it's like another 10 issues or so. And Thanos. But that was the point, was we got to a point where it's like, we're going to have to reveal what's in that freaking cocoon because we've been teasing it out for so long. So it was almost like one of those ones. It was like, why not Thanos? It's like for no rhyme or reason. I can't even remember how we reasoned it out, but it was like, can we bring Thanos back? And they were like, and we were fully expecting to say, no, we've got massive plans for him. He's tied up. And it was like, yeah, sure. And we were like, what? Oh my God. High-fiving and much running around squealing on that day.
You guys killed so many characters when he came back too. So
true. He did, yeah. Well, he had to make a statement. So,
oh my gosh, you guys went out like in a blaze of glory with those issues.
Yeah.
I guess you being such a crucial part of the cosmic saga, and then seeing it in the big screen, my goodness, like your Guardians of the Galaxy that you all wrote. I mean, James Gunn was obviously a fan of that era. He wasn't the fan of the Jim Valentino era like most of us grew up with, or the original. I mean, this is what a lot of people, including myself, have dubbed the DNA era of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
How was that? Was that mind-boggling? Like you were...
It was, and in fact, it's is it Nicola Perlman was she wrote a spec script for Guardians as part of a writing program that they had inside Marvel Studios or Disney, and it was that spec script that James Gunn took and developed into the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. So she's rightly the source material in terms of making of Guardians came from, and I remember reading interviews where I can't even remember why she did that. It was almost like a arbitrary decision, or it was like, oh, well, that sounds fun, but.
That sounds fun.
But I mean, I think it is. If these things can be as arbitrary as that, really, because no one in their right mind would pick, the Guardians of the Galaxy to make into a movie. It's like, as everybody said at the time.
And it's a different time, right? Like back then.
Really, no one, but what was really great about what James did was. I was in this studio one Saturday evening after having a few glasses of wine and just shutting all my computers down late, and I saw a tweet that he'd done. He said, "This is what Hollywood directors get up to when they're in London." It was just a shot of him. He'd taken of himself like lying down on a hotel bed, and he's reading, and he's got his feet up, his socks on, and he's reading a copy of Hawkman. and because I'd had a glass of wine, I'd never have done this otherwise. I tweeted him back and I said, surely you should be reading Guardians of the Galaxy. Because it had all been announced by then, and he replied to me, and he said I've done my homework, something like that, and he said, and then he DM'd me and said we're actually in London now, working on it all. Do you want to come down to the studio and have a visit? Like, oh yes, so.
Well, I'll see if I can work it into my schedule. Andy.
Yeah, I'm busy writing comics with Ron Marz right now. I don't know if I can come out
I'm standing outside your hotel room,
holding a boombox.
So we got to go. So Dan and I got to go down there and read the script and see all of the pre-production stuff. All the makeup tests and all of like they were in full pre-production when we visited the first time, which was wonderful because reading the script was fantastic. What was even better is that was there was the playlist was written into the script, so they even had a tape that you could listen to while you were reading the script, which had the songs in it, and we were looking at. There was a room just full of concept art for all the different worlds, and one of spaceships. I'm looking at the spaceships thinking, these look familiar. And I said, who's done these spaceships? They look really familiar. He goes, I got Chris Foss to do them. And so Chris Foss is a famous British sci-fi artist who basically did all of my childhood sci-fi covers. And their spaceships, so you have this thing of doing like red and black stripes on spaceships and stuff like that. And he worked on Alien concept art and stuff like this.
Okay.
And he said, and so I'm like looking at it, and he goes, I love Chris Foss's artwork. It's like, and I'm like, yeah, good. This guy gets it. It was like, his sensibility and his design sense and his humor was spot on. So when all that came out, we're like, it's in safe hands.
if you grew up and we did, Chris Foss and Roger Dean are like the secret handshake.
Yeah,
that was because it was a different era. There wasn't a whole bunch of this stuff out there. And if you knew who those guys were, you were cool. You were on the inside. It was
when you bought a paperback book on the strength of the cover illustration alone. It was like I'm going to read this book, which is why the Conan books had Frazetta covers. And then Boris Verheyo ones after that. That's why people pick those books up. It's like
you bringing up Frazetta, like, and Ron, you and Tom working together. Tom's artwork, Tom Greinberg's artwork, always reminded me of, like, to me, I've always described that era of his art as like Frank Frazetta met Mike Mignola, and somehow it worked. I loved it, man.
Tom was a great mimic. He could draw in a lot of different styles, and he had sort of come out of the Neil Adams school of that kind of hyper realism in his artwork. And then he started to bring in Mignola influences, and then he started to bring in. Certainly, there was John Buscema going on there too, and Frazetta as well. So all of that stuff. All of that stuff sort of ended up into the, sort of mixed into the same pot. And Tom did do some Thor stuff with me. He did a Thor annual, which I have a couple of the original pages hanging on my wall here. And Tom was supposed to be the guy to take over Thor with me. And we came up with a big, probably 30 or 40 pages of artwork and logos, cover treatments, all the stuff we were going to do with Thor. And just this great selection of material. And then we got shunted off onto Secret Defenders, and the Thor stuff never happened.
Oh, that's a shame. And of course he's still, you're right. He is one of, like, I don't know if mimic is a bad choice of word to use for an artist, but he is a wonderful talent that can just channel these amazing artists from the past. Because he did a book with who was the writer? It was a Tarzan book that was published over at Dark Horse,
Oh, the Roy Thomas.
Roy Thomas, yeah.
Roy Thomas,
It was Roy Thomas.
that stuff was published originally on the Edgar Rice Burroughs website, because I did a couple of Sunday strips for them as well. One with Rick Leonardi for Korak, and the other with the late great Lee Moder for the Mucker. They're both. Korak was new stories. The Mucker was an adaptation of the novels. And initially, Tom and I had put together a couple of pages of Tarzan stuff, because Tom got in touch and said, "Hey, I want to pitch, us doing Tarzan to the newspaper syndicate, so that so that we could do the Sunday strips." And I was like, "Sure. What do you need?" And he's like, "Well, can you write up some Sunday style strips, and I'll illustrate them, and then I'll take them to whatever syndicate had the Tarzan rights at the time." It didn't go anywhere. Like I think I wrote three strips, with Tarzan and animals and like all of the cool shit that you expect in Tarzan. Right. And it didn't go anywhere. And then a few years later, the Edgar Rice Burroughs website announced that they were doing Sunday strips, and that Roy Thomas was going to be working with Tom on the Tarzan strip. And the piece of art that was with the announcement was one of the strips that I had written with Roy's words on it.
Oh wow!
So I was a little miffed, and had to track down Tom, and I was like, "What are you doing? Like I wrote that stuff, and then you handed it off to Roy to write, So yeah, so there was some discussion over the ethics of taking work that you were started with one guy and just handing it to the other guy. And Roy never knew. Like Roy called me and he was like, "I had no idea where these strips came from. Tom never told me." So it was an odd situation. I love Tarzan more than most things in this world. Tom and I were a little at cross purposes for a little while, and yet Tom's Tarzan book is sitting on the pile behind me. So it's still a gorgeous looking book.
Talking of gorgeous books, look at that monster.
Oh wow, is this the Taschen one?
It is. Yeah, my lovely family got me that for Christmas. So which is an answer to the question that just got posed as well.
Yeah, that's a really good question. If you could have a choice of art.
I have a copy of that on order since before Christmas, and it still has not arrived.
Mine came from Germany, so whether they've got a distribution there or whatever. But yeah, Frazetta and Richard Corbin are my answers to those.
That's a great answer. What about you, Ron? If you could have a choice of artist, living or dead, you could work with, who would it be?
I think everybody has to say Frazetta, because he's Frazetta. I mean, I don't think I would be doing what I am doing if I had not discovered Frazetta at that right age, at those Ballantine paperbacks that came out, which I still have back there. I still have my originals. He probably had a bigger influence on me than any comic or novel or anything like that I ever read. That made me do what I want. That made me want to do this. So I think
imagine doing a Tarzan strip with Frazetta then, Ron.
Yeah, right. That would be okay. All right. So I don't know what answer I would have beyond Frazetta, other than I would like to work with my friend Bernie Wrightson again. I miss him.
Yeah.
I
was just looking up there, and I've got a Corbin art book and a Wrightson artwork next door to each other. Again, that's just almost like my wish list of artists I want to work with.
Dark Horse is actually releasing a lot of the Corbin stuff that was previously it hasn't been available in so long.
I've got it all on pre-order.
all recolored by Jose Villarrubia too.
Yes,
he's an amazing colorist. I love his stuff.
That's how I discovered Corbin, by the way. Slow Death.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Which is nice. Yeah.
the underground comic stuff.
For me, it was Heavy Metal, the movie, and then I went to the magazine and I started seeing his stuff.
Yeah, dig out Slow Death, anybody, if you haven't seen it. It's got some absolutely amazing stuff in it. Not Crumbs in there, and Gilbert Skelton and people like that. It's just wonderful stuff.
Well, this is a really good question.
That's a good question.
Ron's favorite Andy piece of work and Andy's favorite Ron piece of work.
I've really never read Annihilation.
What a great answer.
I can. Well, look. Obviously, other than the stuff that we've worked on together, I'm such a big Nova fan that I think I would probably put that on the top of the tree, because that was a book that that was big for me as a kid. Like that when the initial Nova series came out, that was my book. Stuff. Yeah, that was my book as a kid. And like I wasn't old enough at the time to realize that this was Spider-Man smashed together with Green Lantern Corps. So it was new and exotic and fresh to me. So obviously when I got a chance to do Green Lantern, I was basically doing Nova, which is basically doing Spider-Man.
It all comes together, man. That's awesome. I'm also a big fan of that one. What about you, Andy? You ever read any of Ron's work?
I liked all of Ron's CrossGen stuff because just because it was a great time. I think there was it was like an explosion of like creative energy from everybody there. Sounds like a wild time too. So there's that. I really like Shinku as well. Is it Shinku? Is it pronounced Shinku, Ron?
It is in this house.
Okay, good. Or Shinku.
So let me see. This is a kind of a two-part question here. So this is for Andy. Would you ever consider writing another cosmic saga for Marvel, and who would you like to feature as the main character of it?
Ooh. Yeah, no, I mean, in the same way that Ron's gone back to play with the toys again, with Warlock, Surfer, and all that stuff, I think getting another chance to play in that sandbox would be great. And I think it would to me it would just have to be going back to the Guardians again, just to that team and the lineup, and maybe go and explore. Though I must say, some of the most fun stuff out of that were the Rocket and Groot miniseries that we did. That Tim Green drew, which had so much fun with those. There's a very silly. So going back to Planet X, and there's a rebellion of all of the woodland creatures and the mycelium. So there's mushroom people and woodland creatures rebelling. And Rocket says they'll overthrow the government, and they said, "Oh no, we don't want to overthrow anything. We just want an extra hour off in the day and stuff like this." It's like, but yeah, no, to do some of that stuff again would be great fun. I think to go back and do some comic work, particularly in the cosmic realm, that's fun. Do you know what I mean? Just to do some rollicking adventure stuff that's fun, not ponderous, heavy.
Are you saying comics should be fun?
I know it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous.
What you need to do, Andy, is find something very similar to what you and Dan found, sort of by happenstance, with the Cosmic Saga. Is find that little area of Marvel or DC that they haven't touched for a long time, that the editors are like, you can use whoever the hell you want to. We don't care. There's nothing going on with this stuff. Yeah, that's the key.
A bit more difficult to do, I think. Now the landscape has shifted.
Yeah, it's kind of with the movie. Everything seems to be like, well, they can make a movie of this one day.
It's all everything's IP that's ripe for the exploitation at the moment.
What about you, Ron? The same kind of question. What would you love to go and revisit? Like, you still got Kyle stories in there? Surfer?
Yeah, I mean, I never would say never. Yeah, I mean, there are always Kyle stories to tell because I think the characters that you create always end up being a little bit more near and dear to you. Honestly, a lot of the CrossGen stuff was a lot of fun, and we didn't really get to give any of them proper endings. They just sort of, they didn't end, they stopped. So a lot of that stuff would be on the list, and honestly, Luke Ross and I still want to do a third volume of Samurai Heaven and Earth that we started at Dark Horse. We have those rights back now, so we can kind of do it anywhere we want. And I think that's, of anything that I've done, that's certainly, top 5 on the list of things that I've worked on, because it was my first creator-owned book, and it's the sort of book that, it turned out to be exactly what we wanted it to be. Like, every page is exactly what we intended for that book. And that's kind of a rarity in this business. You don't always get the opportunity to make the thing just the way you want to make it, because you are playing with somebody else's toys, and there are compromises involved, and there are compromises involved because of other editorial concerns, other deadlines, all of that stuff. So being able to do Samurai Heaven and Earth was just such a sheer pleasure, because we got it, we got to make the book exactly that we wanted to make.
Oh, love it. Andy, this question's for you, and this is one that whenever I show this stuff, people ask me, like, what happened, or what's going on? Will they ever work together again? And this is any chance that you will work with Dan Abnett again?
Unfortunately not. It's just things have gone too far down. Too many years have gone by. Too much water under the bridge for that to happen again, which is a shame. We had a great run. Did some really good stuff together, and really enjoyed the time we had working together. But unfortunately, not anymore.
Thank you for that answer. It's time for the Sleaze Brothers to return.
Yes, it is. In fact, it's like we wrote that as a pastiche on the political climate at the time when Ronald Reagan was president.
Oh my goodness, it's been a while then.
Exactly.
Man, we thought things sucked then, and look where we are now.
I mean, a story where there's a ridiculous man in the White House. Just I don't know what possible parallels that could have with recent or future events. But yeah, no, I'd love to do some more Sleaze Brothers stuff. It was the very first thing I did, okay, at that scale, which was wonderful. And it would be fun to pick up a pencil and maybe try penciling again. I think that would be the only thing I would pick up a pencil and start penciling again.
Sleaze Brothers. That's awesome. I have left a link in the description of the video in case you're watching this later, where you can go and help support this new hardcover from both Andy Lanning and Ron Marz. It's got 12 days left, and it is Resolution, just in case you're watching this a little bit later. As far as creators, like, one of the things that I get asked often when I have people on here is, what's your advice for people that are trying to break it into comics? Like, what would you give somebody that's either trying to become a writer or become an artist? Like, how would you advise somebody? Or, I mean, even word it better. Like, if you could go back in time and tell your young self, this is the path you need to take and avoid these routes. Or do you need those bumps along the road to be where you are?
Well, I think obviously you learn the experience. That means good experiences and bad experiences both. But I think that, the thing that I tell people over and over again, and I actually actually teach a comic writing course and do workshops with students. You know, to me, the way to learn how to make comics is to make comics. There's no substitute for actually sitting down and making a comic, whether you write it and draw it yourself and do the whole thing, or you gather a team with you and you make the comic. A number of the students that I have at I work with a place called the Jacob Kruger Studio in Manhattan. And a number of the students have, you know, now produced their own comics. Now have
That's
an issue or a couple of issues that they can hold in their hands. And you know, what I told them at the beginning was what they parroted back to me once they had the book, which is, you know, you don't know what you don't know. Like, you have to go through the process to learn how to make the book. And then when you're done with the book, you're thrilled with it, because this is the stuff of dreams, right? This is what you wanted to do your whole life.
Yeah.
A week later, you look back at the book and you just see all the mistakes you made. So you want to do the next one. So that's the process. You learn how to do this. You learn how to make the books by making the books. So I would say, more so now than ever, there are no gatekeepers anymore. Just make your comic. Figure out who you want to work with and what kind of story you are passionate about telling, and make the book. And then whether you put it out digitally or do a small press run, do a crowdfunding campaign on Zoop or on Kickstarter, there's no substitute for actually doing it. So, you know, make your first comic, and then take the lessons from that comic into your second comic. And that's how you build a resume. That's how you build your skills.
Man, that is some great advice. Andy, what about you? You artist and writer, so
yeah. And I think it's really, to echo what Ron said, is just, you know, the best way to become a writer is to read, and the best way to become an artist is to draw, and look at other artists. You know, it's like, just, and if you're going to make comics, nothing's going to stop you making comics. You know, because, you know, before doing this professionally, I was, you know, filling up sketchbooks that were full of drawings that were my own versions of comics, and reading and drawing, and you know, just it's like one of those things where the more you do it, the better you get at it anyway. And even you know, I'm sure Ron's had this, when people come up to you at conventions and show you their stuff, and they ask you for advice and stuff like that. And particularly when people come and show you their artwork, you know, it can be quite awkward, because some people will show you stuff and they're clearly, you know, they're not professional standard, but they're really keen and excited about what they're doing. And what I say to most people who show me their stuff is when you're working on this, does everything disappear? You know, I said to them, it's like, so you'll sit and you'll draw something, and you'll look up, and suddenly an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours have just totally disappeared. And a lot of the guys are really, they go, yeah, that happens all the time. I say, that is priceless. You're going to the place that all the professionals go. It's like, there's a zone that you go into where the world just disappears. You know, it's like, you know, your tax bill doesn't matter. You know, the fact you got to go and take the dog for a walk doesn't matter. Everything vanishes from around you, and you go into that zone. And I said to people, no matter what you're doing, at whatever level you're doing it, having the ability to go into that place, that creative zone, that not everyone can do that. That's not something everyone can do. You know. And that's you know, you know, if you really want to do it professionally, then you harness that and you hone it and you develop it. And but even if you don't, you're going to a really cool place. You know, it's like and again, it's like I've done it when I've been writing, I've done it when I've been inking, and I used to do it like when I was not doing it professionally. You just sit and draw, and your mind just goes. It's fantastic.
It's you know, writing and drawing are both like a muscle. Like, you have to work it out every day to get good at it. You know, you do this job just when the muse strikes, which is sort of a bullshit way to approach anything. But you can't say, oh, the muse didn't visit me today, I couldn't do anything. Well, if then it's a hobby. Then it's a hobby that you pursue once in a while. If you want to do this and be serious about it, you got to do it every day. You got to do it on the days that it's easy and you go to that place without even trying. And you got to do it on the days where it's not easy and it's a grind, and you just have to get something done. That's what being a professional in this business is. You got to get something done every day. You can't just sort of wander away for a week or two because you don't feel like doing it. The times when you don't feel like doing it and you still produce something, that's what separates the professionals from everybody else.
Damn, some wonderful advice. I'll take one more question because I know you gentlemen are busy, but what is the best advice or insight one of your colleagues ever gave you?
Andy once said to me, "Don't drink that. You don't know where it's been."
You don't know where it's been.
I think my real answer is the first time Jim Starlin sat me down to teach me how to write comics. He said, "Comics are frozen moments in time, and that's how you have to think of them. If your brain can't resolve that as single frames, single panels to tell a story, and your job as the writer is to pick out what those moments are and to direct the reader's attention to those moments. That's basically what writing comics is picking out frozen moments in time. It's the first thing that Jim Starlin told me, and it is what I still use to this day, and it's the first thing that I tell anybody that I talk to about writing comics. That is first and foremost, that's the job. Frozen moments in time.
Really interesting advice, and thinking about it like that. What about you, Andy?
Yeah, mine's not mine because the way I came into it was more of an inking thing, and it was back at Marvel UK. Paul Neary was the editor-in-chief at Marvel UK, but he was also an absolutely fantastic inker and artist himself. And it's kind of like it's advice, but it's also just sharing knowledge and tools, because I think you'll find if you talk to artists, particularly inkers, you're very obsessive about paper and ink and nibs and pens and it's like everyone, when artists put pictures up of themselves drawing and stuff, I'll zoom in and try to look at what they're drawing with and what's on the table, and so Paul would share all this knowledge around actual types of dip pens, and there was this old shop in London of this guy who would sell a gross of nibs in a paper bag that he would spin to do it up. Put them in the bag and then spin it and hand it over to you. And so I got a lot of knowledge about the craft of the actual tools from Paul. And then the other thing he said was like, inking isn't it's not like doing your own thing over the artist. It's trying to bring out what the artist the penciler has done, but mainly it's all about making it three-dimensional and playing with light. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. And it's because it's this idea that if light is coming from this direction, the first line you draw in here is thinner than the line here where the shadow is. And you can do this with a circle. If you just draw a circle and then you draw once, if you think light's coming from here and you draw this side of the circle really thick, suddenly that circle becomes a sphere because it looks three-dimensional. It's like one of those ones. It's like I've got to draw it to show you. It's like, but it was just making me think about things in a different way, rather than it was all. I was looking like just trying to copy my favorite inkers and what they would do, fix to fins and stuff like this. And it was just this understanding that there is actually theory behind what people are doing that's worth considering and studying. Look, so that's the thing. Can you see that? Is it too bright? But it's like if you draw the bottom line thicker and then you sort of like draw some lines coming out of it, it suddenly it takes on, it becomes more of a sphere than just a circle.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? It's like and that's tethering, going thin to thick, is about light. It's going from light to dark. It's where the light, and then when you crosshatch, it's light to dark. So that kind of was just one of those moments to me where I was like, just made me think about what I was doing in a different kind of like Ron, like Jim said, you just make you'll suddenly you go, oh, that makes sense now. Of I can look at these things that I've just I've reacted to viscerally, and actually think about what I'm doing when I'm doing it.
Yeah, it's the glimpse behind the curtain, but then once you've had the glimpse behind the curtain, you can't really go back. Like you don't, I and Andy and I have had this discussion before. Stories, whether they're film or television or comics, like if the story doesn't work, our brains like unzip them and figure out, well, that doesn't work. That's wrong. That's so when we discover some form of entertainment that just pulls us in, and we're not thinking of the pieces, we're not thinking of how this is put together and the framework of the story. That's when something really works. Because otherwise, it's when you're a professional storyteller, it's what you do every day. It's harder to be swept away by something because you see all the gears. You see all the gears in motion behind the curtain.
Oh, you guys have given some wisdom today. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining me. And thank you for everybody watching live and watching later. The Zoop, again, goes up until, I think it's got 12 days left. Mm-hmm. I've got the link in the description of the video, but just in case, this is the link right here. And you can go there and support these gentlemen and their book that hopefully will get expanded into more books later on, and maybe we can have a huge giant size collection of it on our shelves one day.
I was going to say it'll be a nice book. It'll be a good bit of kit. So and hopefully we know the artwork looks bloody lovely, and I believe, Ron, the words are good too. So
just out of curiosity, I don't know if you guys know this or not though. When will the physical copy be? What kind of date are they looking for?
We're not 100% sure. We should be sending it off the press, late this week or early next.
Okay.
Then it's sort of out of our hands, and it's more about like the printer's schedule and all that. And
mm-hmm.
Things are much better in terms of supply chains than they were, a year or especially 2 years ago. But it's really a matter of, when it goes on the press and when it gets shipped out to the fulfillment house. And so there's, will still be, some weeks certainly, but, we don't have any control over that part of the process.
Gotcha.
You just you send it to press and you keep your fingers crossed. And thankfully, the kind of projects that I've been involved in Kickstarters or whatever, we've never had any real issues of mistakes in the printing or anything like that. So, it's sort of like sending your babies off to school, and you hope they come back in one piece. But we're pretty confident. The team that we have putting this together has done this plenty of times before and is very well acquainted with the process. And I think we're in good shape.
And more importantly, I want to say to the people who backed it initially, because it has been, this is like one of those campaigns that seems to have gone on and on and on. But it's like I think we'd written some Q&As, and I was saying it's like possibly launching something in the middle of a global pandemic wasn't necessarily
not the brightest idea we've had.
No. Well, but with hindsight and all of that, but we appreciate the patience that those people have shown. probably they've all forgotten about it by now, and it'll turn up in the because I've done this with Kickstarters.
It's a nice surprise. Wow.
It'll be a lovely surprise, you know. 'Cause it's like, you know,
that's hilarious because I just received a package I completely forgot about.
It's lovely though, isn't it? What a lovely thing.
It was a video game, but in the same sense, it was 3.5 years ago so it went to my old address. And I'm like, what the hell? Why do I have to sign for something overseas? And it was just this thing that I had forgotten about.
Yeah.
But it's a nice surprise. It's a nice surprise when it arrives. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. And I will definitely be following your work no matter where you two end up, even if it's together for a while or going your separate routes to do your own thing. You guys have social media presence or anything that you want people to follow to keep up with news, where you're going to be, what you're working on next?
I did have a Twitter account, but it got hacked, and so I can't. Twitter did this thing where they said we're removing two-factor authentication. I removed it. The next day, my account got hacked. So I would be on Twitter at Andy Lanning, but unless Twitter are listening to this and their support team want to reply to the endless emails I'm sending them, no, I don't have any other presence.
Well, I was told that the new Twitter CEO was a genius, and all of this would be much better.
Yeah.
I am on Twitter in an unhacked account, so that's just at Ron Marz.
Okay.
My website is new and updated and all sorts of swanky, which is ronmarz.com. I'm on Instagram as well, but I tend not to pay much attention to that because there's just so many hours in the day.
Mm-hmm.
The Twitter account is, until the whole building burns down around us. Twitter account is the main one, so that's just at Ron Marz.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. And one more person, thank you so much to Jordan for helping put this together, for getting everybody together to do this. And again, you can find the resolution on Zoop, and the link is in the description of the video in case you need to go there if you're watching this after the live. Stay healthy, everybody. Thank you so much.